Service accommodation is a super popular business right now, and the reason is you can make a phenomenal amount of money without starting with a huge amount. Now the thing is, during the time that we've been involved in this business over the last few years, we've seen so many operators just come and go. That's because they make so many mistakes. In this video, I want to share with you the 5 key mistakes that you need to avoid to build a successful service accommodation business. Hey, if you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 plus years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing journey. When it comes to service accommodation, there's a number of key mistakes that we see people making. It's the same common mistakes we see time and time again. So let's just jump straight into them. Mistake number 1 that we see people making is not doing enough due diligence on a deal that may be being offered to them. So if you're relying on a sourcer to bring a deal to you, they'll do some due diligence. They'll present the information to you and say, look, this is how much it's going to be. This is what you're going to pay. This is how much rent you're probably going to collect or income you're going to generate. These are going to be your costs. And hey presto, this is your profit. And they want 3,000, 5,000, whatever it might be as a fee for that particular deal. Now, I'm not saying they haven't done thorough due diligence. I'm not saying that their due diligence is no good. What I am saying is you should be responsible for double checking those facts to make sure that this is going to work. So you want to make sure the income figures tend to match up to what you think it's going to be. And even basic things like, for example, if it's an apartment in the building and it's on a lease, you need to check within the lease that there is consent to be able to run it as a short stay business, to have guests stay for a short period of time, because often it's restricted to somebody's home or to run it as a buy-to-let. Again, with the block of apartments, there's usually a management company in place that manages that particular building. You need to check that they're okay with you running it as a short stay business as well. So you've got different people coming and going. They've got different people who've got access to the building, keys, fobs, access to the parking, all these things. Are the management company okay with this happening? And then often there's a mortgage on the property as well. So you need to check that actually is the mortgage provider okay with you turning it into a short stay or holiday let type of a business. And for most of the deals that I get to see that people are sending around and selling, very few will actually do the due diligence to check these things for you. So you need to double check the facts that are being presented to you, but also check these extra things as well, that actually there's some longevity in being able to operate this business. Because there's a number of horror stories I've heard where people have purchased deals in this way, then go to operate the business and they're shut down within a couple of months. The reason they're being shut down, because they hadn't checked these other things. The second mistake is not doing enough due diligence on the location itself. It may be in the first mistake that you've covered all those things off. The mortgage provider's good, the lease is good, the management company are happy, all of the things stack up, but you've got to check out the location itself. And so many people just assume just because somebody's found a deal or they've found a property which they think they can let in this way, that actually it's actually going to work in that particular location. So if you think about hotels, for instance, which primarily are going to be your competitors, when you think about those, there's different types of hotels. So you got hotels that are 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star hotels, and the level of service and the quality of accommodation will vary. But also the locations, when they vary, the prices will vary there as well. So the offering that they have will appeal to different types of clientele. In the same way, you've got to think the type of people you're trying to encourage to come and stay with you, what will they think about that location? Is it something that's going to appeal to them, or could they get put off? And location is not just where it is, but also how easy is it to get to. So for example, if you've got an apartment that's above a kebab shop and you've got to go to some dingy alley with a flickering dim light in the evening, go up some greasy metal staircase in order to access the apartment, is that going to appeal? Now it may be, it does appeal to some people at a certain price point. However, if your figures are being calculated on a premium nightly stay, however your accommodation is that of more of a budget standard, then the two things are not going to match. So you've got to make sure that the property is in a location that is actually going to work for the type of clientele you want to bring there. Ideally, you want to be able to tap into a multiple different client base so you're not reliant on one particular source. For example, it might be people there for contract work, or it might be people that are there for leisure stays, for example, big conferences, seeing parents seeing kids at university. There's all different reasons why people might stay in a property for a short period of time, just like they would in a hotel. And the more different type of clientele you can tap into, it de-risks your business of taking away the reliance on one particular type. Now, it's important to mention that some type of accommodation is more seasonal, particularly those that are more leisure-based, where people go away because they're taking a break, a summer break, a winter break, an autumn break. They might be traveling away because they're going to see that area or taking a break there, but actually, is that demand still going to be there at a different time of the year? So if it's a seasonal business, you need to make sure that you can generate enough income to cover the periods when it's going to be much quieter. This reminds me of a friend of mine whose father used to run an ice cream van, and what he used to do is work super hard during the summer months, make a killing in the amount of money he was making, and then he'd put his feet up for the rest of the year, and often he'd be abroad, maybe sunning himself and enjoying himself rather than working hard. But he had to make enough money during that season to cover for the time where there wasn't going to be any other income. Mistake number 3 that people make is not treating this as a proper business, thinking they're a property investor. A property investor is somebody that invests in a property and that property generates a return. In service accommodation, yes, it's based on a property you might own, that you might have invested in, or one that you've got of somebody else's that you control. But ultimately, you have to run a business at that particular property, which is providing short stay accommodation, and it's really all about hospitality. And that's a big mistake people make. They don't realize how much time and effort you need to put into it to build up this business, not only on your reviews and what people think about the business, but also the systems and processes you need to put in place to make sure it operates really well. Just really simple things are not really ending up with things like double bookings, where you've got one platform, for example, you're advertising on Airbnb, you're advertising on booking.com, and you get booking for the same property from the 2 different platforms at the same time. So you end up with a double booking, and then you've got now a problem to deal with. Something really as simple as that. These things can be taken care of by having good systems and processes in place. Over the time in our service accommodation business, where we now sleep probably about nearly 300 people each night, we've built up a number of systems and processes, but it's not reliant on necessarily one piece of software or one tool. It's a number of things that bolt on together to make the whole process work nice and smoothly, so it all flows through. You can either learn how to do these by following somebody else's systems and processes, for example, learning from us in terms of what we do, or you can build these yourself if you're that way inclined to make sure that it runs properly. But ultimately, it's a business that you're running and you're not property investing. These systems and processes should protect you from being taken advantage of, for people using it, for example, as a party pad and staying for a couple of nights and smashing the place up because they've had a party there, or maybe the type of guests who only want to book by the hour. Do you know the kind of guests I mean? You want to avoid people like that. Good systems will filter these things out, but ultimately you can't do everything yourself. Your systems will help to a point, but then you need to think about other people that might be able to help. For example, your housekeepers. If you've got, for example, 3 or 4 units that you're managing and you've got everybody checking out at 12 o'clock, you can't go there and change the bed sheets and change everything and get the property turned over and ready for the next guest to come in at 3 o'clock when you've got 4 of these to do at the same time, because you can only be in one place. And you don't want to do these things. You should make sure you've got people in place that you can delegate some of these things to, so you can build and scale this business. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, then I'd like to ask you of a favor. That's smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. And that really just helps us reach more people just like you, so they can enjoy this content too. On the channel now, I've got 300 plus videos here, really for your viewing pleasure. So let's get now back into the content. So the next mistake that I see people making, mistake number 4, and this one is really common, that they get the wrong paperwork in place, i.e. they haven't got the right contracts and agreements set up in order to be able to run this as a business properly. If you're doing rent to service accommodation, that means you're taking on a property from somebody else that you don't own in order to provide accommodation for third parties, i.e. your guests that can be in the property. So you need to make sure you've got the right contracts and agreements to be able to reflect that. And often you see people just use an AST agreement, which is a standard tenancy agreement, but that's if you're going to live in it yourself. If you're not going to live in it yourself, then that's the wrong agreement. And obviously with service accommodation, we want multiple guests, different guests changing all the time, and you want to have control over how that works. So the right agreements to use, you either have a lease agreement, which is like a commercial arrangement that gives you control of the property, then allows you to then issue the relevant documents from underneath that, which I'll talk about in a moment, or you have a management agreement, which then allows you to manage the property really on behalf of the owner, and you're sitting in the middle making a fee. And then when your guests come and stay at the property, you then don't issue them an AST, again, because it's not their permanent home. What you do, they sign a license agreement that allows them to come and stay for a period of time, a number of days, very much like it would be if you're going to stay in a hotel. They don't issue you with a tenancy agreement, but they give you a license agreement that you've signed up to. People sometimes will ask around for free agreements and copies of agreements that they can use and just copy and paste and be able to use. But ultimately, I think it's really important that, yes, you can look at those to get an idea of how they're drafted, but really the best thing to do is to get a solicitor to draft it correctly for you. If you're doing any of the trainings and programs with us, then yes, we give you our sample agreements. And if you're attending our service accommodation workshop, if you're interested in that, reach out to us and let you know the dates of that. Then we give you all the documents and the systems and processes that we use to help you build that business. But they're not a case of it copy and paste, but they give you a foundation to be able to start building the business from. Paperwork is a little like an insurance policy. What that means is if you make a mistake and something goes wrong, that insurance policy then protects you. But paperwork, very similar. If you don't have have the paperwork in place, and hey, let's say you're fortunate, you're not making mistakes, nothing goes wrong, it may be that there's not a problem. And that's why some people say, hey, it doesn't matter, you can just copy and paste a document. But the reality is things do go wrong, and if something was to go wrong for you and you don't have the right paperwork in place to protect you, it could end up meaning that you end up in a very difficult situation. The fifth and final mistake that I see people making in this business is they scale and build a business too quickly. So what happens is sometimes people, when they get started, they have challenges trying to just get started, get the first one up and running. They get over that hurdle, they build some relationships, they start talking to agents who start bringing them property. They can see that they're taking these properties on, and what an agent sometimes will do is say, hey, I can see this person takes these properties on, and they keep passing on more properties. And the operator says, hey, that's great, I can take this one, I'll take this one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one over there. And they take on all these properties very quickly, but they don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place to be able to build and scale at that stage. At the beginning, you've got to get 2 or 3 properties right, working really well, making you good money, allowing you to build the systems in place, the processes, so all works smoothly with the team that's going to help you, are your housekeepers, your cleaners, other people that might be working with you, to make sure that's working solidly before you start building it. Otherwise, what happens, you start building it on rocky foundations, and we know what happens with rocky foundations. Soon it gets to a certain level, the whole thing just collapses. And we've seen this happen so many times. And if this is what you want to do, or you run a service accommodation business, then I strongly encourage you to make sure those solid foundations are solid so you can build a business the way you want to. Ultimately, the way I see service accommodation, it's a business that should allow you to build some income up to then go and do some real property investing, i.e. buying property, adding value, selling that, or putting those into a portfolio to bring you a long-term income. As with many businesses, as you build these, you might have a bumpy ride. And with service accommodation, particularly during the pandemic, we certainly had some challenges that we were facing and had a dilemma in case of how do we keep going and how do we continue to work on the business when many people were not staying, they were cancelling their stays, and we had all the overheads. If you want to learn more about that, I've got this video lined up over here for you to watch. But just before you go and do that, make sure you click on my face down here to subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free, and I'll see you on this video over here.